The ballroom was roaring with applause as billionaire Victor Hale stepped onto the stage, smiling like a king who had finally won the world. Cameras flashed, champagne glasses clinked, and then he made the announcement that would shock millions. Standing beside a glamorous woman in silver, he declared, "Meet the new Mrs. Hale." The crowd erupted until the doors backstage opened, because the woman walking toward the same stage, calm, elegant, unstoppable, was his real wife. The woman who built him when he had nothing. The woman he erased when success arrived. And in seconds, his empire began to collapse, live in front of the world. Backhand index pointing right if you love powerful life tales about betrayal, karma, and shocking twists. Hit like, subscribe, and comment truth right now. Don't miss what happens next, because this wasn't just a scandal. It was the night truth took the spotlight, and a king fell to his knees. The ballroom shimmered like a constellation brought down to earth. Crystal chandeliers blazed overhead, reflecting off silk gowns, diamond cufflinks, and the polished smiles of the powerful. At the center of it all stood Victor Hale, a man who had clawed his way from obscurity to the summit of global influence. Tonight was his coronation. The Titanium Crown Award, the highest honor in international business, was about to be placed in his hands. Victor adjusted his tailored tuxedo and smiled as the applause thundered. This was the moment he had imagined for years, the moment that would erase every memory of poverty, humiliation, and sacrifice. Beside him stood Lydia Cross, breathtaking in silver satin, her fingers gripping his arm possessively. The world knew her as his partner, his muse, his future. When Victor leaned into the microphone, the room hushed. "Tonight," he announced confidently, "I don't just celebrate success, I celebrate rebirth." He turned toward Lydia. "Allow me to introduce the woman who will walk into my future as the new Mrs. Hale." The applause exploded, but somewhere backstage, a woman in an emerald gown froze mid-step. Elena Hale, Victor's lawful wife, stared at the stage monitor, her heartbeat roaring louder than the crowd. She was the final presenter of the night, and Victor had no idea. Elena lifts her chin, her calm more terrifying than rage, and walks toward the stage that is about to become a battlefield. Backstage was chaos. Stylists rushing, assistants whispering, producers counting down seconds. Yet Elena moved through it like a ghost wrapped in dignity. Her emerald dress hugged her frame with quiet elegance, not screaming for attention, but commanding it. Years ago, Victor had once said green was the color of her strength. She remembered the nights they slept in a one-room apartment, sharing dreams instead of dinner. She remembered pawning her jewelry to fund his first failing venture. She remembered signing documents without reading them, trusting the man she loved more than herself. Now that same man had erased her with a sentence. A young assistant nervously approached. Ms. Elena, you're on in 2 minutes." Elena smiled softly. "Thank you." Inside, something ancient and powerful stirred. This was not the night she had planned to reveal herself. She had intended to remain invisible, content with quiet survival. But fate had dragged her into the spotlight, and she would not waste it. She glanced once more at the screen. Victor laughed beside Lydia, intoxicated by applause, blind to the blade approaching his back. Elena took a steady breath. The stage manager raises his hand. Presenting the final award, in 5, 4. The lights dimmed, music swelled. Then Elena stepped onto the stage. For a split second, the audience applauded automatically, until recognition spread like wildfire. Whispers rippled, gasps followed, phones were raised. The air turned electric. Victor's smile faltered. His face drained of color as if someone had pulled the ground from beneath him. Lydia's grip tightened, her confident smirk cracking into confusion. "Victor," she whispered. "Who is that?" He couldn't answer. He couldn't breathe. Elena stopped center stage, her posture regal, her eyes steady. She did not look at Victor yet. She faced the audience, her voice calm and melodic as she began her prepared speech about integrity, resilience, and truth in leadership. Each word felt sharpened, deliberate. Then slowly she turned toward Victor. Their eyes met. In that moment, the years collapsed. Love, betrayal, sacrifice, and ambition collided in a single breath. Victor's knees nearly buckled. This was not a nightmare. This was reckoning. "Elena," he mouthed. She smiled. Not kindly, not cruelly, but knowingly. Elena lifts the final award and speaks Victor's full name. "Victor Alexander Hale," Elena said clearly into the microphone. The room erupted into stunned murmurs. Lydia stepped back as if burned. The cameras zoomed in, broadcasting Victor's unraveling live to millions across the world. "Elena, what are you doing?" Victor croaked, his voice cracking. She continued, unshaken. "I was asked to present this award to a man celebrated for vision and honor." She paused. "But honor demands truth." The silence was unbearable. "I am Elena Hale," she declared. "Victor's wife. Legally. Faithfully. Still." Lydia staggered, her face ashen. "That's not true," she snapped, panic bleeding through. "Victor told me." "He told you a lie," Elena said softly, finally looking at her. "Just as he told the world." Victor reached for the microphone, but Elena raised a hand. The crowd watched in breathless awe as the mighty titan shrank before them. "And tonight," Elena continued, "the truth has come for its seat on this stage." Cliffhanger. Security moves closer, but Elena hasn't finished. Victor's advisors whispered frantically. Sponsors shifted in their seats. The live broadcast counter ticked upward. Millions watching a king dethroned in real time. Elena revealed documents on the screen behind her. Marriage certificates, company filings, signatures bearing her name. Gasps turned into thunderous disbelief. "What Victor never told you," she said, "is that this empire was built on foundations he did not lay alone." Victor shook his head violently. "Elena, stop. We can talk." She met his eyes. "We already have. For years. You just stopped listening." The audience felt it, the shift. Power changing hands not through force, but through truth. Lydia fled the stage in tears. Victor stood alone. Elena drops the final revelation, ownership. The screen behind Elena flickered once, then filled with documents. Legal documents. Victor's breath hitched as his own signature appeared in high resolution, stamped across contracts he hadn't thought about in years. The crowd leaned forward as if pulled by gravity itself. Lawyers in the front row exchanged stunned looks. This wasn't emotion anymore. This was evidence. "Elena, don't do this," Victor whispered hoarsely, his voice barely audible over the hum of the room. But Elena's voice remained steady, unwavering. "Years ago, when Victor Hale stood on the brink of bankruptcy," she said, "he needed capital. Investors wouldn't touch him. Banks laughed him out of their offices." She paused. "So he came home. To me." The screen changed again, bank transfers, asset liquidations, property deeds sold in her name. "I sold everything I had," Elena continued. "My inheritance, my family home, my future security. And when the lawyers asked who should hold the shares, her eyes met Victor's. He told them to put my name down. Just in case," he said. A sharp inhale rippled through the audience. Victor staggered back a step. He remembered that night. The candlelight, her tired smile, the way she trusted him completely. "That just in case," Elena said softly, "became tonight." Her finger tapped the final document. "I own 49% of Hale Global Enterprises." The room erupted. A board member stands abruptly. "Then this award ceremony is no longer valid." The applause had turned into chaos. Journalists shouted questions. Camera flashes fired like gunshots. Victor stood frozen, his perfect image shattering frame by frame across live television. This wasn't scandal, it was annihilation. "Elena," Victor said again, louder now, desperation creeping in. "Please, let's step away from this. We're humiliating ourselves." She looked at him with something close to pity. "No, Victor. You humiliated me long before tonight. I'm simply refusing to stay silent." Security escorted Victor and Elena off stage, but the damage was irreversible. The hashtags exploded within minutes. Hashtag the real Mrs. Hale, hashtag billionaire exposed, hashtag truth on stage. Back in the green room, Victor collapsed into a chair, running trembling hands through his hair. I built this, he muttered. I built everything. Elena removed her earrings calmly. No, you climbed it. I carried the foundation. A lawyer rushed in, breathless. Mrs. Hale, Elena, your phone hasn't stopped ringing. The board wants an emergency meeting. Victor's head snapped up. They can't do that without me. Elena met his gaze. They can. And they will. Outside, Lydia Cross watched the building from her car, tears streaking her makeup as her phone buzzed endlessly. Agents dropping her, sponsors pulling out, friends suddenly unavailable. Everyone who touched Victor Hale was burning. The board meeting is scheduled for dawn. As dawn broke, Elena sat alone in a quiet hotel suite, staring out at the city skyline. She should have felt victorious. Instead, she felt hollow. Her phone buzzed with messages, support, admiration, praise. Strangers calling her brave. Powerful women thanking her for standing up. Yet her thoughts drifted backward. To the nights she waited up for Victor. To the dinners gone cold. To the promises postponed until after the next deal. She remembered when love had been enough, and when it stopped being seen. A knock sounded. Victor stood in the doorway, unshaven, eyes red. No cameras, no applause, just the man she once loved. You could have destroyed me privately, he said. She turned slowly. I begged you to see me privately. For years. He sank into a chair. I didn't mean to erase you. But you did, she replied. And you replaced me like I was disposable. For the first time, Victor had no defense. Elena receives a message that changes everything. Lydia is talking. The interview aired at noon. Lydia Cross sat across from a famous journalist, dressed in white, eyes red-rimmed and trembling. Victor told me he was divorced, she sobbed. He said Elena was unstable, obsessed, refusing to let go. Elena watched in silence. Then the journalist leaned forward. We reached out to Mrs. Hale. Cut to Elena's recorded response. Calm, composed, devastating. I was married. I was faithful. And I was lied about. The journalist turned back to Lydia. Mrs. Hale has provided legal documentation disproving your claims. Lydia broke down. Public sympathy shifted like a tidal wave. Victor's phone rang endlessly, but no one he needed was calling. Cliffhanger. The board announces a vote of confidence. The boardroom was colder than the stage had ever been. Victor sat at the head of the table out of habit, until a quiet voice spoke. Victor, Elena said evenly, that seat is no longer yours. One by one, board members avoided his gaze. The chairman cleared his throat. Given recent revelations and shareholder pressure, we are calling for a temporary restructuring of leadership. Victor stood. You can't do this. I am Hale Global. Elena stood as well. No, she said. You were its face. I was its spine. The vote began. Hands raised. Victor watched his empire slip through his fingers. Not with a crash, but with chilling silence. The final vote is cast. The boardroom felt like a courtroom awaiting a verdict. The city skyline beyond the glass walls glowed cold and distant, indifferent to the collapse happening inside. Victor Hale stood rigid, his hands clenched at his sides, watching the very people who once applauded his every word avoid his eyes. One final vote remains, the chairman said gravely. Time slowed. Victor's mind raced back to the early days, the first office with flickering lights, the deals that almost failed, the nights Elena stayed awake reviewing contracts while he slept. He had convinced himself those sacrifices were part of the past, buried beneath success. Now they were rising like ghosts. The final board member lifted his hand. Yes, the word echoed louder than thunder. By majority decision, the chairman continued, Victor Hale is hereby removed as Chief Executive Officer of Hale Global Enterprises, effective immediately. The room exhaled as one. Victor staggered back into his chair, disbelief etched across his face. You're destroying the company, he whispered. Elena stepped forward, not triumphant, not cruel. "No," she said softly. "We're saving it from the lie it was built on." A security officer appeared at Victor's side. "Sir, we'll escort you out." Victor looked up at Elena, his voice breaking. "Was any of this ever real to you?" She met his gaze, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "It was. That's why this hurts." As Victor is led out, Elena is offered the seat she never wanted, but must now claim. The leather chair at the head of the table felt heavier than iron as Elena sat down. This seat had consumed Victor, had changed him. She felt its weight immediately. Outside the boardroom, reporters gathered like storm clouds. Inside, executives whispered anxiously. No one had expected this woman, the forgotten wife, to become the most powerful person in the room. "Elena Hale," the chairman said carefully, "as the largest individual shareholder, the board recommends you assume interim leadership." She closed her eyes briefly. This wasn't revenge. It was responsibility. "I will accept," she said, opening her eyes. "On one condition." Every head lifted. "There will be transparency," she continued. "No hidden deals. No personal relationships disguised as strategy. Hale Global will stand on truth, or it will not stand at all." Silence followed. Then, one by one, heads nodded. Outside, Victor watched from across the street as Elena emerged from the building, cameras flashing. Not as his wife, not as his shadow, but as his successor. Something inside him shattered completely. That night, Victor makes a desperate decision. Victor's penthouse was eerily silent. The walls once decorated with awards and magazine covers now felt mocking. He poured himself a drink but couldn't bring it to his lips. Every screen replayed Elena's calm face, her measured words, her unshakable authority. He had underestimated her. No, he had erased her. His phone buzzed. One message. "Elena, we need to talk. Tomorrow." One last time. Victor stared at the screen, hope and fear colliding in his chest. Was this forgiveness, closure, or the final cut? Across the city, Elena stood by her window, looking down at the same streets she once walked beside Victor, dreaming of a future together. Now she walked alone but stronger. She knew this meeting could destroy her resolve. And yet she agreed to it. The past comes face to face with the present. They met in the old cafe where everything had begun. No cameras, no lawyers, just two people and a history too heavy to carry. "I loved you," Victor said immediately, desperation stripping him bare. "I still do." Elena listened without interruption. "Love without loyalty is just noise, Victor." "I lost myself," he admitted. "Success. It poisoned me." She nodded slowly. "And you let it." He reached across the table, stopping inches from her hand. "Give me a chance to fix this." Elena withdrew gently. "You want redemption. I want peace." Tears welled in his eyes. "So this is it?" She stood. "This was it long ago. I'm just the one brave enough to say it now." Victor watched her walk away, realizing too late that the woman he betrayed was the only one who ever truly saw him. That same night, a scandal threatens Elena's new reign. Elena's first week as interim CEO was relentless. Emails flooded in. Investors questioned her authority. Anonymous threats whispered through the corridors of power. Someone wanted her gone. And badly. Then the leak hit. Old financial records surfaced online, twisted to suggest Elena had manipulated events for personal gain. The media turned vicious overnight. Is the new Mrs. Hale really a hero? One headline read. Or just more calculated than her husband? Elena stood before the board once more, exhaustion in her bones, but fire in her eyes. "They're testing me," she said, "and I won't flinch." She authorized a full independent audit, opening every book, every secret, every skeleton. If truth had brought her here, truth would protect her. Outside, Victor watched the chaos unfold, realizing the empire was now attacking the only person trying to save it. Elena prepares to face the world again, but this time alone. The press conference hall was packed beyond capacity. Microphones crowded the podium like weapons pointed at Elena's chest. Reporters whispered, waiting for her to crumble. Headlines had already judged her. Opportunist, mastermind, wife turned wolf. Elena stepped onto the stage alone. She wore no designer armor, no forced smile. Only calm. "I will not deny scrutiny," she began. "I invited it." A murmur rippled through the room. "Every financial record of Hale Global is now open to independent review. Mine included." A reporter shouted, "Are you saying you orchestrated Victor Hale's downfall?" Elena met his gaze. "No, I survived it." The room fell silent. She spoke of accountability, of systems that protected power over people. She never insulted Victor. That restraint stunned them more than anger ever could. By the end, even hostile journalists were listening. Across the city, Victor watched the broadcast from a dim apartment he had rented under an assistant's name. For the first time, he saw Elena not as the woman he left, but as the leader he could never be. The audit's first findings are released, and they don't implicate Elena. Victor's world had shrunk to four walls and silence. His phone no longer rang with opportunity, only debt collectors and lawyers. Invitations vanished. Friends became strangers. The name Victor Hale still echoed online, but it no longer commanded respect. It inspired caution. One evening, he wandered past the old warehouse where Hale Global had begun. The lights were off. The sign had been removed. He pressed his palm to the cold metal door, memories flooding back. "You should have never forgotten who stood with you here," a voice said behind him. Victor turned. It was an old employee, one he'd fired without explanation years ago. "She kept us alive," the man continued. "You just took the credit." Victor had no reply. That night, he finally admitted the truth he had avoided. Losing Elena hadn't been collateral damage of success. It had been the beginning of his failure. Victor receives a message from an unexpected ally. The audit results shook the industry. Irregularities surfaced, not during Elena's involvement, but years earlier under Victor's unchecked authority. Shell companies, silent partners, a signature that wasn't Elena's but his. Elena stared at the report in disbelief. "They hid this from me," she whispered. Her legal team exchanged grim looks. "Victor authorized these deals alone. If this goes public..." She closed the folder slowly. "Then it goes public." When the findings were released, the narrative shifted overnight. Elena was no longer on trial. Victor was. Prosecutors announced a preliminary investigation. Victor read the news in shock. He remembered signing those papers, convinced he was untouchable. Now the ink was coming for him. Victor realizes someone else was involved, and they're still free. Elena sat in her office long after midnight, the city glowing beneath her window. She had the power now to protect herself fully by letting Victor fall alone. But something held her back. She requested a private meeting with authorities. "I won't cover for him," she said carefully, "but I won't lie to destroy him either." Her honesty changed the tone of the investigation. Prosecutors dug deeper and uncovered the truth. Victor had been manipulated by a powerful financier who used his ambition as leverage. Victor wasn't innocent, but he wasn't the only villain. When Victor learned Elena had refused to falsify testimony against him, he broke down in tears for the first time in years. She could have ended him. She didn't. The real mastermind is exposed and threatens Elena directly. The financier's name hit the news like a bomb. Markets trembled. Political connections unraveled. Anonymous threats began arriving at Elena's office. Subtle, menacing, relentless. "Step down," one message read, "or we won't be responsible for what follows." Elena refused security escorts. "Fear is how they win," she said calmly. Victor watched from afar, knowing those threats were meant for him once, but now aimed at her. For the first time, he understood the depth of her courage. As the investigation neared its climax, Elena prepared to testify publicly. The night before the hearing, she stood alone on the same stage where everything had begun. Empty now, quiet. She placed her hand over her heart and whispered, "I'm ready." The courtroom doors open, and the final act begins. The courthouse steps were flooded before sunrise. Cameras lined the barricades, reporters shouting questions into the cold morning air. This was no longer a business scandal, it was a global reckoning. Inside, silence reigned, thick and heavy, as if the walls themselves were listening. Elena entered first. She wore black, not for mourning, but for resolve. Every step echoed with quiet authority. She did not look toward Victor when she passed him, seated behind his attorneys, thinner now, hollowed by sleepless nights and regret. Once he had commanded rooms like this. Now he barely existed within it. When Elena took the stand, the courtroom leaned forward. She spoke clearly, recounting the early years, the sacrifices, the trust she placed in Victor. Her voice never trembled, even when memories threatened to break through her composure. She spoke of documents signed without transparency, of decisions made without her knowledge, of a woman slowly erased from her own life. Then the prosecutor asked, "Mrs. Hale, did you ever knowingly participate in illegal activity?" Elena met Victor's eyes for the first time that day. "No," she said firmly, "and I refused to lie then or now." The truth settled like a verdict before one was even spoken. The defense calls Victor Hale to the stand. Victor's legs felt weak as he stood. The courtroom murmured as he raised his hand and swore to tell the truth. Once he would have controlled this moment, shaped it, spun it. Now there was nothing left to protect. "I betrayed my wife," he began, voice raw. "Before I betrayed the law." Gasps rippled through the room. He spoke of ambition unchecked, of fear disguised as confidence. He admitted he had allowed powerful men to manipulate him because he wanted more. Status, validation, escape from the woman who reminded him of who he used to be. "I convinced myself success meant leaving her behind," he said, tears streaming freely. "But I left behind the only thing that ever made me human." Elena stared straight ahead, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Victor's confession dismantled what remained of his defense. By the time he stepped down, there was no illusion left, only consequences. The judge prepares to deliver a decision that will change everything. The courtroom stood. The judge's voice was steady, deliberate. "This court finds Victor Hale guilty of multiple counts of fraud and conspiracy." Victor closed his eyes. The sentence was announced: prison time, asset forfeiture, permanent removal from corporate leadership. The empire he once ruled evaporated with a single gavel strike. Then the judge turned to Elena. "Mrs. Hale," he said, "this court finds no evidence of wrongdoing on your part. Your cooperation and integrity were instrumental in uncovering the truth." A wave of emotion surged through the room. Outside, the crowd erupted as the verdict spread. Some cheered, some wept. History had chosen its side. Victor was led away in handcuffs. As he passed Elena, he stopped briefly. "I'm sorry," he whispered. She nodded once. "I know." Freedom brings Elena no joy, only an unexpected emptiness. Months passed. Hale Global emerged transformed, leaner, transparent, respected. Under Elena's leadership, the company thrived not through intimidation, but trust. Employees spoke her name with reverence, not fear. She stood on a stage once more, this time receiving an award of her own. "Leadership," she said in her acceptance speech, "is not about standing above others. It's about standing accountable." The applause was thunderous. Yet later that night, alone in her home, Elena removed the award from its velvet box and set it aside. Achievements no longer filled the space where love once lived. She visited the cafe where she and Victor had last spoken. She sat alone, watching couples laugh, hands intertwined. She felt free and lonely. Elena receives a letter from prison. The envelope was simple. No return address needed. Victor's handwriting was unmistakable. Inside, there were no pleas, no excuses, only accountability. "I don't ask for forgiveness," he wrote. "I ask only that you live fully, without carrying what I broke." Elena folded the letter slowly. For a long time, she sat in silence. Then she did something no one expected. She wrote back, not with promises, not with reconciliation, but with release. "I forgive you," she wrote. "Not for what you did, but for what I refuse to carry anymore." She sealed the envelope with steady hands. Outside, the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in gold and crimson, the colors of endings and beginnings. Years later, Elena steps onto a familiar stage one final time. Prison stripped Victor Hale of everything that once defined him. There were no suits, no assistants, no applause. Just concrete walls, iron bars, and long nights filled with memories he could no longer outrun. In the beginning, anger kept him alive. Anger at fate, at Elena, at the world that had turned its back on him. But anger eventually burned itself out. What remained was reflection. He volunteered in the prison library, helping men who had never believed in second chances learn how to read contracts, letters, even their own names. For the first time in decades, Victor listened more than he spoke. He learned what it felt like to be invisible. Some nights, he reread Elena's letter until the paper softened from use. Forgiveness had not freed him, but it had cracked the door to something unfamiliar. Humility. As the years passed, his name faded from headlines. New titans rose. New scandals replaced his. The world moved on. Victor stayed behind, finally understanding that the greatest punishment was not prison. It was knowing he had destroyed the one person who never tried to own him. Elena, unaware, prepares for a moment that will echo the past. Under Elena's leadership, Hale Global became a case study in ethical transformation. Universities taught her methods. Governments consulted her strategies. She refused personal glorification, redirecting credit to teams, systems, and accountability. Power no longer lived in her voice, it lived in her example. Yet success did not harden her. She funded shelters for women abandoned by powerful men. She created mentorship programs for spouses who had been erased by ambition. She never spoke Victor's name publicly, but her work answered for him. One afternoon, her assistant entered quietly. "Mrs. Hale, the awards committee would like you to present the titanium crown this year." Elena froze. The same award, the same stage, the same spotlight. Time had folded in on itself. After a long pause, she nodded. "Tell them yes." Elena steps into the place where her life changed forever. The ballroom shimmered once more. Different faces, different era, but the same chandeliers, the same electric tension. As Elena waited backstage, she glanced at the monitor. Remembering the night her world shattered and rebuilt itself, she inhaled slowly. When she walked onto the stage, the audience rose to its feet. No gasps this time, no shock, only respect. "Elena Hale," the announcer said, "a woman who redefined leadership." She approached the podium with quiet grace. The weight of the past did not slow her steps, it strengthened them. As she lifted the award, she paused. "Years ago," she said, "this stage showed the world how fragile lies can be. Tonight, let it show how powerful truth is." The applause thundered, not for spectacle, but for substance. In the audience, an unexpected name appears on the guest list. Later that night, Elena returned to her suite. Waiting on the table was a letter, forwarded through legal channels. Victor's release notice. No message this time, just a date. She stared at it for a long moment. She felt no fear, no longing, no anger, only closure. She placed the paper in a drawer and closed it gently. Some chapters did not need rereading. Outside, the city glowed, alive, endless, forgiving. The final image mirrors the beginning, but everything has changed. Years later, Elena stood alone on a quiet stage after a leadership summit. The lights dimmed one by one until only a single spotlight remained. Soft, steady, honest. She remembered another spotlight once, harsh, blinding, built on lies. This one belonged to her. She placed her notes down and spoke to the empty hall. "Betrayal can elevate you briefly," she said softly, "but truth is the only thing that lasts." In the back of the room, unseen, Victor watched from a distance. Free, aged, humbled. He did not approach. He did not speak. He understood now. The spotlight was never his to reclaim. Elena stepped off the stage, into the darkness, unafraid, because truth had already crowned her.